We're a little over a week away from the highly anticipated UFC 319 pay-per-view card, and I'm pretty pumped for this event. I think the main card is kind of funky, but there's some really solid matchups. The main event is obviously top tier, and then the prelims I think are really solid. Some very fun matchups that are like buried even like on the early prelims here for UFC 319. So in this video, I'm going to be going through, giving my full card predictions, breaking down every single matchup, main card and the prelims, giving my pick and how I think they get it done. There's going to be timestamps down below in the description if you guys want to jump around to specific matchups. If you enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe, and then drop your picks down below in the comments. Would love to hear who you guys are rolling with. But we are going to start off with Karine Silva taking on Dione Barbosa. This is actually a rematch from pre-UFC in 2019, where Barbosa won a decision over Karine Silva. For Karine here, she is 4-1 in the UFC. She's coming off her first loss in the promotion, a pretty competitive, like very close decision loss to Viviane Araujo. She has very good grappling, 50% takedown accuracy, has 3 submissions in her 4 UFC wins, but she doesn't necessarily have the best defensive grappling, where she was taken down 3 times on 3 attempts in that Araujo fight. Then for Barbosa, she has an 8-3 pro record, 2-1 in the UFC, coming off a submission win against Dione Belbita. 4 of her 8 pro wins are by submission, the other 4 are by decision. But similar to Silva, she was also outgrappled in her lone UFC loss, which came against Miranda Maverick. I think this is going to be a competitive matchup. These women are obviously familiar with each other. Both are solid grapplers, but both also have some deficiencies there. I think it's close. I think it could be a split, but I'm going to slightly lean towards Karine Silva by decision. I think she's a little bit better on the feet, and I do trust her a little bit more in the grappling department. Then we have a really interesting matchup up at 185 here between Nursulton, Ruziboev, and Bryan Battle. These are both guys who have fought at 170 in the UFC before. For Bryan Battle, that was pretty much, his entire UFC run. Ruziboev had like the one fight down against Joaquin Buckley and then has moved back up. Ruziboev is 4-1 in the UFC. Only loss came in that Joaquin Buckley matchup. He's a very dangerous fighter. 13 wins by knockout, 20 by submission. Only 3 of his wins have gone the distance. In his 9 losses, though, they've primarily gone to decision. 7 of those losses have gone the distance, 1 time getting knocked out, 1 time getting submitted. He does have, kind of a weak strength of schedule, where the best win he's had has been against Bruno Ferreira. That win has definitely aged very well, knockout there. But like his other 3 wins, Dricus Dumas, Eric Meconico, Dustin Stoltzfus, not exactly going up against the best of the best. He has a big frame for the weight class, 6'5" with a 76-inch reach, which makes it even crazier that he was actually able to make 170. I do think there could be some question marks here, just on like his overall grit when the fight does go long. When you look at a guy's record, and a lot of their wins are by finishes, and then the vast majority of their losses are by decision, typically it means that they're going out there, they're trying to get the finish early, but if they don't get it, they can kind of fade and they'll wilt, and like the cardio will not hold up, and then they end up losing a decision. Now, I will say for Ruziboev, he did show some real like dog in the Dustin Stoltzfus fight, where it started off rough, ended up coming back and getting the decision win. For Bryan Battle here, 7-1 UFC record, 5 of those wins are by finish. He has a really strong gas tank. He is going to push the pace. He is a volume puncher, but also does have some pop, like has the ability to starch his opponents. He has 2 UFC wins in under 45 seconds. One of those was a head kick, but the other one was that super quick knockout. I want to say it was against Gabe Green, where he just like rushed him right away and got nuked pretty early on, but also has some solid grappling, decent submission game. He actually has more pro wins by sub than he does by knockout. I think it's kind of interesting that he's moving up to 185. Didn't necessarily strike me as like a huge welterweight, but he's not going to be super undersized. Like he's 6'1" with a 77-inch reach. It'll be interesting to see like if he's kind of filled out here, moving up to 185. I just think between these two, I think Bryan Battle is going to push the pace. Ruziboev certainly could be live to just nuke him early, but I think if Battle can survive like the first round, I think he is going to pull away. I think he is going to put a ton of volume on Ruziboev, and I think he ends up taking a decision. Don't think he finds the finish, but I think he pulls away, wins the second and third, and gets it done 29-28. Then we have Edson Barbosa taking on Drakkar Klose. Fun to see Barbosa back in the octagon, coming off a 15-month layoff. His last fight was a unanimous decision loss to Lerone Murphy in a main event. Barbosa, even though he's getting up there in age, still dangerous, still very competitive against legit competition. This is his first time up at 155 since 2019. I think it makes sense for him to come back up. Like, I could see going down to 145, trying to make that last title run, but at this point, it's not going to happen. Why are you killing yourself to get down to 145? Take it a little bit easier, come in at 155. He's had a ton of success in this weight class throughout his career. We know he's a super explosive kicker, great spinning attacks, knees, has decent takedown defense, like 72%, but you also have to factor in that he has gone up against some legit top tier grapplers, Khabib, Kevin Lee, Bryce Mitchell down at 145. For Drakkar Klose, actually a really strong UFC record, 9-3, coming off a pretty tough loss to Joel Alvarez, where he was pretty much knocked out and submitted in the same fight. But he's a tough out. He's not going to quit on himself. He's been fairly durable throughout his career, pretty well-rounded skill set. Does have some limited finishing upside, where he had that slam KO against Joe Selecki, and then he had another knockout somewhat recently, last few years, but it was like a dude who I think is like an 0-2 UFC record, so not someone who's super UFC caliber. I think Klose is going to come in here. He is going to try to pressure Edson Barbosa. He's going to try to push the pace. You want to crowd the kicker. I just don't really trust his grappling to be dominant enough to consistently take Edson down and hold him there. And I think Edson's going to catch him at some point. We kind of saw in the Billy Q fight, Billy Q trying to push that pace. He runs into a knee. I think we could see something similar here. So I'm going to go with Edson Barbosa, round 2 knockout. Now, I'm not going to count Drakkar Klose out, but I just don't know if he has the speed, explosiveness to really close the distance, land those takedowns, and kind of avoid getting clipped by Edson. So I will be riding with Edson here. Then sticking around in the same weight class, we have Alexander Hernandez taking on Chase Hooper. Hernandez is coming off of back-to-back decision wins. He's really kind of struggled to create margins in some of his recent fights, where he kind of came into the UFC and it was wow, this super dangerous, powerful striker. He's going to have a ton of finishing upside. And it just hasn't really translated as of late. He's primarily a striker, but he is, willing to mix it up if he needs to. We have seen him fade in some of his fights when guys are able to push a pace against him, but I do think he's shown some improvements recently where he has been able to go out there, win round 3 in some of these, newer matchups. I do think he's going to be the better striker here against Chase Hooper. We know he does hit fairly hard. He's got some pop in his hands. I think it's just a question of, can he stop the grappling of Chase Hooper? Because Chase Hooper is extremely dangerous on the ground. He's riding a 5-fight win streak. 3 of those wins came by submission. He just has great submission offense. The ground and pound is coming along. It's pretty solid. And then he is just going to push a relentless pace where he's going to try to force you there, and then he is going to scramble. He's going to be relentless. He's going to be switching positions. He's going to be landing shots. It's just once he gets you on the ground, it's going to be tough to navigate from there. On the feet, though, he is still very raw, and I think he actually has kind of the bad combination of he's raw on the feet, but he still has some confidence in his striking. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be confident in your striking. Confidence is good, but sometimes if you feel a little bit too comfortable on the feet, you're not going to force the issue grappling like you should. And I think we saw that in the Steve Garcia fight where he was just getting clipped time after time. The chin was right there. Steve Garcia was consistently landing, and he kept trying to strike. It's at some point, dude, you got to go in, you got to force the grappling. And so that is a concern, right? If he's trying to play around on the feet too much, he could get clipped, and we could see Alexander Hernandez finish him. But I do just trust Chase Hooper to get this fight to the ground. I think Hernandez is going to fade due to the grappling pace of Chase Hooper, and I think Hooper gets him out of there in round 2. I'll go Chase Hooper, second round submission. Then we have a women's matchup here between Jessica Andrade and Lupita Godinez. Andrade has been on a rough stretch here, back-to-back losses. She has lost 5 of her last 7. In those 5 losses, she has been finished in 4 of them. But I will say she's gone up against some really strong competition. So Jasmine Jasdavicius, Natalia Silva, Tatiana Suarez, Yan Xiaonan, Erin Blanchfield. These are all women who are challenging for the title or one win away from getting that title shot. We know she hits pretty hard. I like to see her back down at 115. It just fits her frame a lot better. She pushes a decent pace, 6.39 significant strikes per minute. For Lupita Godinez here, 8-5 UFC record. She has been super active, 13 fights in 4 years in the UFC. She's going to push a high volume wrestling pace, averages over 3 takedowns per 15 minutes. 47% takedown accuracy. She does just have some limited finishing upside here. Jessica Andrade is the significantly more dangerous woman. Lupi's had 1 knockdown in the UFC. She has never been knocked down though, so she is pretty durable. She has 2 submission wins in the UFC against Elise Reed and Silvana Gomez Juarez, but she has just faced the much lesser competition compared to Jessica Andrade. The last time I checked, Lupi is a 2-1 favorite. That seems kind of off to me. I just think she is very reliant on getting the takedown, and Andrade is just like infinitely more dangerous on the feet. Lupi's also had like multiple instances of going out there and having very questionable game plans where she doesn't push the wrestling like she should, and that kind of scares me here against Andrade. And like Andrade has been taken down and like submitted and finished by some women in recent fights, but you're looking at like Erin Blanchfield up at 125, very physically imposing. Jasmine Jasdavicius, same thing. Tatiana Suarez, like, yeah, that was at 115, but I think Suarez is a different level when it comes to her wrestling. And so I don't think it's fair to say, like, all right, she's just going to be, like, taken down at will by Lupi. And I think we could get into a spot where if Lupi can't land that takedown, she might kind of be a sitting duck on the feet. So I'm actually going to go with the underdog here with Jessica Andrade. I'm going to take her by decision, but I do think we could see her land a big punch. Don't know if she finds the finish, but I think those big moments are going to help her get the win here. Then we have just a clear stylistic clash between Gerald Meerschaert and Michal Oleksiejczuk. This is a very binary fight. This is the grappling of Gerald Meerschaert versus the striking of Michal Oleksiejczuk. We know Oleksiejczuk very dangerous on the feet. Meerschaert, one of the best submission artists in the UFC. Meerschaert is coming off of back-to-back losses to RDR and Brad Tavares. Honestly, looking back and watching that RDR fight, it's crazy how RDR is going like life and death with Gerald Meerschaert, and then he's like picking up, I know it's very competitive, but like picking up a win against Robert Whittaker. Like if you just watched that Gerald Meerschaert fight and had no idea about him like pre-UFC and in one championship, like you would have thought he really had no future. Now he's, potentially positioning himself for a title shot. For Gerald Meerschaert, 11 of his 12 UFC wins are by submission. Throughout Meerschaert's UFC career, we have really seen him struggle when he can't land that takedown. So jiu-jitsu is great, but he doesn't necessarily have the best like offensive wrestling to get the fight to the ground. He has a 31% takedown accuracy, only 1.86 takedowns per 15 minutes, which is not ideal for someone who's like clear path to victory is on the ground. And then also, like, the dude's a finisher. He has 0 decision wins within the UFC. He's going in there, he is looking for the finish, and more often than not, it's going to come on the ground with a submission. For Michal Oleksiejczuk here, 7 of his 8 UFC wins have come by knockout, and all of them have come in round 1. So he is a very quick starter. He gets dudes out of there early on. Southpaw striker, super powerful left hand. He has faced some really tough opponents here in the UFC. These are all his losses in the promotion. Shara Bullet, Kevin Holland, Michel Pereira, Kyle Bohalio, Dustin Jacoby, Jimmy Crute, Ovince St. Preux, and Khalil Roundtree. Like, pretty much all those dudes I think have been ranked at some point. Maybe Shara Bullet hasn't, but like all top 15 level competition. You have Khalil Roundtree fought for the belt. Kyle, I think at some point is going to fight for the belt. So even those losses, like, you're not going to ding him too hard for those. The issue for Michal Oleksiejczuk here is that his glaring weakness has been his submission defense. He has 9 pro losses, 6 of them are by submission. So if that gets tested here against Meerschaert and Meerschaert can get the takedown, I think Oleksiejczuk is going to be in trouble. So I can see a very clear path to either of these guys winning. Meerschaert needs a single takedown. He could get the submission. Oleksiejczuk could obviously just nuke him on the feet early on. And I am slightly leaning towards Oleksiejczuk getting that knockout. Meerschaert's aging. He's limited on the feet. He's not super explosive. Like I said, not great at getting that takedown. And so I think Oleksiejczuk, he's a fast starter. We've seen him get a lot of finishes in the UFC in round 1. I think that's how he does it. Michal Oleksiejczuk, round 1 knockout. Then we have a pretty fun lightweight bout here between Bobby Green and Diego Ferreira. For Bobby Green here, he has been on a rough stretch. He has been finished in the first round in 3 of his last 4 fights. He's a very fun, unique striker. His hands are going to be down. He's very reliant on his reaction time, his head movement. He throws stuff at awkward angles where he'll kind of be like square and he'll just like, pop the jab from his hip. His straights are very nice. Doesn't come with a ton of power, but has actually shown like some increased finishing upside over the last few years. Pretty solid takedown defense, but it's also been pretty untested as of late. He's gone up against a lot of strikers who are just going out there to stand and bang with him. He is getting up there in age. He's 38 years old. He has 50 pro fights. He has 27 fights in the UFC. He has been knocked out 6 times in his career, and he has gone unconscious in his last 4 losses. That's not great, right? Aging fighter, taking a lot of damage, someone who has the style of hands down, like potentially very hittable, especially if that reaction time is starting to fade. On the other side here with Diego Ferreira, he's had a very interesting UFC career where he's faced some very, very tough opponents. Like his 3rd and 4th fights were Beneil Dariush and Dustin Poirier. After those 2 losses, He won in a 6-fight win streak against like really solid comp. Olivier Aubin-Mercier, someone who like didn't have a ton of success in the UFC, but really peaked later on in the PFL. Jared Gordon's, been a staple outside the top 15. Rustam Khabilov, Mairbek Taisumov, and then Anthony Pettis. So like Khabilov, Taisumov, not super well known, but like very solid UFC records. Obviously Anthony Pettis, former champion. Then he hit a wall and had 3 straight losses to Beneil Dariush, again, Gregor Gillespie, and then Mateusz Gamrot. Since those 3 losses, he has gone 2-1 since. He's kind of got an interesting skill set where he's not super slick on the feet. He's not super fast, not super quick, but he does have a lot of pop where if he hits you, you might go out, you might get hurt. We saw it in the Michael Johnson fight, like landed that overhand right and just put him out cold. He doesn't have great takedown defense. He can be controlled on the ground, but he's a very slick offensive grappler and can also land some very solid ground and pound. So in this matchup, I think Ferreira is way more well-rounded, but I could also see if Ferreira can't get the takedown, you could see Bobby Green kind of building his momentum, pulling away on the feet. I am just nervous about the durability here of Bobby Green, where I think Ferreira has the ability to mix things up here, but he also has some pop on the feet, and he might just need that one shot where Bobby Green's going to have to rack up a ton of volume, and Ferreira might land that one shot, and all of a sudden this is a completely different fight. So I'm going to go with Diego Ferreira round 2 KO. I also just trust his finishing instincts, where we saw in the Rebeski fight, where he was landing some nasty ground and pound, ended up getting the finish like super late in that 3rd round, and really just like put a beating on him in round 3. Now, I believe we have arrived at the main card here. We're going to start off with Tim Elliott taking on Kai Asakura. This is pretty much like a pure grappler versus striker matchup. Tim Elliott getting up there in age, especially not great at flyweight, where he is 38 years old, coming off a 1.5-year layoff. Both of those are pretty much red flags, right? Long layoff, also aging in a weight class that guys typically don't age super well in. He's a very good grappler, 47% takedown accuracy, averages 3.7 takedowns per 15 minutes. Also been very durable. He's never been dropped in the UFC. He's got kind of like a funky style. He's going to have lots of movement. He cuts angles, tons of head movement, very good cardio, just like a very crafty fighter. Not super physically gifted, but just makes the most of what he's got. On the other side here with Asakura, obviously we've seen one fight with him in the UFC. That was a title fight against Alexandre Pantoja. He was submitted in the 2nd round. And I kind of feel like in that matchup, we saw like the full spectrum of Asakura's strengths and weaknesses as a fighter. On the feet, he is super quick, he's super explosive, has great knees, has great kicks, and then also does hit very hard, like has real power in his hands, but he can struggle in the grappling department. He also kind of struggled defensively, like moving backwards when Pantoja was blitzing him. He was getting clipped. I think we could see Tim Elliott try to replicate that. Like, Tim Elliott isn't anything close to Alexandre Pantoja, but they do have some overlapping skill sets where I think Elliott could take some things from Pantoja in that matchup. I'm still going to lean towards Asakura, though. You have like an aging Tim Elliott, and I know he's been durable, but 1.5 years off, Asakura is so quick. I think he gets the round 1 knockout. I mean, if Asakura is getting it done, he's probably getting it done early, so that will be the pick. Then in the next matchup, we have Michael Venom Page sticking around up at 185 and taking on Jared Cannonier. I feel like so far with MVP's UFC run, I felt pretty good about picking his fights, whether it's for him or against him. And with MVP, he's just such a weird puzzle to solve where he is such a tough matchup for pure strikers. If someone's going to go out there and they just want to stand with MVP for 15 minutes, I'm pretty much going to pick MVP every single time because his style is so unique. You can't prepare for it. Like, you look at Charbullet, I felt very good about MVP going into that fight because I'm like, Charbullet is not going to have the ability to take him down and hold him down. MVP is just going to like throw that like weird karate style where he's at a crazy range and then he blitzes in, but he's not going to throw a ton of strikes. And so it's just super tough to catch him. And so MVP went out, he won that fight on the feet, but we did see him struggle in that Ian Gary fight where Gary took him down twice, racked up 7.5 minutes of control time. And Ian Gary just had like enough grappling upside, the ability to clinch, get on the back, where like Kevin Holland didn't really have that offensively in his bag. And then same thing with Charbullet. For Jared Cannonier, he's had some pretty impressive longevity. This dude is 41 years old. He's fought in 3 different weight classes in the UFC, and he's coming off a round 4 knockout against Gregor Rodriguez, where he was hurt bad early in that fight, came back, picked up the big win. For Cannonier, I'm pretty surprised that he is the underdog in this matchup. He is a capable grappler. He is totally content to work in the clinch, kind of hold guys there. He took RoboCop down. He had 7 minutes of control time against Nasruddin Imavov. He landed 4 takedowns against Marvin Vettori. Now, I think the big concern for Cannonier is the durability, right? He was knocked down twice by RoboCop. He was knocked down by Kyle Bohalio, like hurt bad. He was knocked out by Imavov. Now, maybe it shouldn't have been stopped, but he was still hurt badly on the feet. And so, like, yeah, MVP with one of those blitzes could catch him, put him away. But I just think Cannonier's going to come in here with a good game plan. I think he's going to be clinch heavy. I think he's going to try to find the takedown. And we're looking at, like, a guy moving up from welterweight versus a guy in Jared Cannonier who's a solid size 185er, someone who used to fight at heavyweight. I just think Cannonier is going to have the physicality advantage, and I do trust him to fight intelligently, get to the clinch, and I think he's going to win a decision there. And so I am going with the underdog here with Jared Cannonier. Then we have a really fun striker versus striker matchup between Geoff Neal and Carlos Prates. Geoff Neal averaging like about half a takedown per 15 minutes. Prates averaging 0.25 takedowns per 15 minutes. So I'd be pretty surprised if either guy looks to wrestle. I think if one guy's trying to engage in the grappling, I think we could see Geoff Neal kind of try to clinch Carlos Prates like we saw him do against Ian Gary, but not super concerned with that from Prates because Geoff Neal didn't really make the most of it in that Ian Gary fight. Geoff Neal has a super boxing heavy style. He pushes a solid pace, 5.1 significant strikes per minute. He's landed 8 knockdowns in 12 UFC fights. He has only been knocked down himself 1 time. He does take some damage though. He absorbs 5.44 significant strikes per minute. That is more than he deals out, which certainly not ideal. For Carlos Prates, he has a 4-1 UFC record. All 4 of those wins are by knockout. Southpaw, hits very hard, works the body well, like knees to the body, front kicks. Even in that, unanimous decision loss to Ian Gary, he had Ian Gary in trouble late in that fight, just like wasn't quite able to get the finish. Kind of a frustrating performance because he started really slow, but then really showed the ability to like threaten Ian Gary later on in that fight. He did limit the control time pretty well in that matchup. Ian Gary went 4 for 19 on takedowns, 3 minutes of control time in a 25-minute fight. Historically, we have seen Geoff Neal struggle with these rangier opponents. He has UFC losses to Ian Gary, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Neil Magny, and Wonderboy, and his only knockout loss in his career came on the regional scene against a very rangy Kevin Holland. So I am going to side with Prates here. I think he's a little bit more dangerous on the feet. I think he's going to be able to keep the range. And with Geoff Neal being kind of a shorter, stockier welterweight, we have just seen him struggle in these styles of fights. So I'll go with Carlos Prates by decision. I could certainly see Prates get a knockout. You had Li Jinliang, who had never been knocked out before. Prates was able to do it, but man, Geoff Neal's durable. He's gone up against a lot of really solid dudes and has been able to hang in there for the most part. So I'll go Prates by decision, but a knockout certainly wouldn't shock me. And then we've arrived at the co-main event. This was a really interesting breakdown here between Lerone Murphy and Aaron Pico. I actually like this fight a lot more than the Aaron Pico-Movsar Evloev fight. I kind of felt like Evloev sort of already deserved a title shot. Now he probably won't get it because he had to pull out of this fight. But I do like this matchmaking here. You have Lerone Murphy, undefeated, 8-0-1 in the UFC. He's coming off a unanimous decision main event against Josh Emmett. Just an all-around very, very good fighter. Primarily a striker, but is willing to mix in the grappling. He's very defensively responsible, only absorbs 2.67 significant strikes per minute, but he does have some limited finishing upside where his last 5 wins have all been by decision. Aaron Pico is a really fun addition to the UFC roster. He has spent his entire career in Bellator. He was pretty much like pegged by them as a future star really early on, before he even made his pro debut. He was the U17 Freestyle Wrestling World Champion. He was an Olympic alternate in 2016. So a very credentialed wrestler, but has really kind of rounded out his game. And like, if you just saw him fight now, I don't think you would think he had a wrestling background. Like, he's more striking heavy. And he actually did have a pretty rough start to his MMA career where he lost his debut, shockingly. Went 4-3 in his first 7 fights. He was finished in all 3 of his losses, but he's really bounced back since then. 9-1 record. That only lost in the last 10 fights was because of a shoulder injury. He is a great athlete. He is super explosive. He blends the striking and the wrestling very well. On the feet, he is going to wing big hooks. He rips the body. He will throw that lead left hook to the body like from the floor. Would not want to get hit with that. Also has some really nice uppercuts, dropped a couple of dudes with that punch. And then he's got some very good ground and pound, can land some nasty elbows on the ground. I think this is a really interesting stylistic clash because you have Lerone Murphy, who's very patient, very calculated, very safe. You have Aaron Pico, who's not going to say he's like wild and has like bad fight IQ, but he's willing to take a lot more risks. He's very explosive. He might be willing to, eat a shot or put himself at risk to land a big one of his own. And so I was pretty torn on this. Like, I think Pico's way more dangerous, but he certainly hasn't faced the same level of competition as Lerone Murphy. In some of my past prediction videos, I've whiffed on a lot of these guys, kind of coming into the UFC. I picked Patchy Mix to win. That didn't go well. I picked Tofik Masayev over Miktabek Oralbai. Recently, I picked Marcus Buchecha. Now, obviously, I had like different, ranges on how in I was on these guys. But, man, I think Pico's really good. He's super explosive. He's dangerous. I think he's the guy who can have the bigger moments in this matchup. And when we have seen him lose, it's been him getting finished. And I just don't know if Lerone Murphy has that upside. And so I think it's going to be competitive. I think it'll be back and forth. But I just feel like Pico's going to have those bigger moments where you're looking at the round and it's like, all right, it was close. The strikes were pretty even. But Pico landed that one big shot. He stumbled Lerone Murphy. And I just feel like Lerone Murphy doesn't have that same power coming back at Pico. So I'm going to go with Aaron Pico by decision. And if he loses this fight, I might just have to like never pick another high-profile guy coming in ever again because the track record would not be great. And then we have arrived at the main event, Dricus du Plessis taking on Khamzat Chimaev. Now, if you guys want to see a more in-depth breakdown, I have a full video posted already on the channel just with this one specific fight. But I think this matchup pretty much comes down to one question, and that is, can Dricus du Plessis survive the first round and a half against Khamzat Chimaev? Like that early, just relentless grappling pace that he is going to push. We have seen Khamzat fade in fights in 3-rounders. I don't think he can fight at this pace for 5 rounds. In fact, I know he can't fight at this pace for 5 rounds. I do think it's interesting if he's going to try to like come in and be more reserved. I kind of feel like that's the wrong play because I think if he just goes in there and like does that crazy grappling pace, I do think he could find the early finish. And I think he loses a lot of his like danger factor if he does really try to pace himself. But I mean, who knows? Maybe he could be a little bit more patient and actually go the 5 rounds and put together a really solid performance. We know DDP has very good cardio. He's proven it over 5 rounds. If Khamzat's not getting that early finish, it's tough for me to see him like going out there and winning rounds 3, 4, 5. Like I think DDP will pull away if he doesn't get finished early on. But you have Khamzat Chimaev, who is arguably the most dangerous round 1 fighter in UFC history. 5 of his 6 UFC finishes came in the first round. In the 3 fights that went into the second round, he had a 10-8 in round 1 against Kamaru Usman. He, against John Phillips, had 2 10-8s and 1 10-7 scorecard. And then the most like pedestrian round 1 was a 10-9 over Gilbert Burns. He's never not been able to land the takedown right away. Like, yeah, he's been stuffed a few times, but if he's wanted that takedown in round 1, he has been able to get it. And I kind of feel like DDP's grappling is getting a little bit overrated because I feel like people look at his frame and his athleticism and they think, all right, like he'll be able to stuff the takedowns. He'll be able to get back up. And I'm not saying his grappling is bad or anything, but like I just haven't seen it proven to me, right, when I'm watching these fights that like he is going to be able to stop this from Khamzat Chimaev. He has been pretty untested as of late, like in the UFC's 50% takedown defense, but he's only been shot on 6 times in 9 fights. The most concerning thing I saw for DDP in his UFC fights was the 2023 matchup against Derek Brunson. Now, I understand it was a couple of years ago. I'm sure he's gotten a lot better since then, but it still was not ideal where Brunson was able to take him down. Brunson could hold him there for a little bit. DDP was really reliant on like these big explosions to try to get back to his feet and didn't have a ton of success with that. And then for DDP, like maybe he's improved, but he's certainly not someone who's known for having great fight IQ. Like he does funky stuff. He puts himself in weird positions, but he's very physically gifted. He's tough. He's durable. He hits hard. So he's kind of able to get away with a lot of this stuff. I'm just not trusting his fight IQ to like make the right decisions when Khamzat Chimaev is on his back and threatening with submissions. Like I haven't seen it and I just don't really trust it. I have a much larger sample size of Khamzat Chimaev being dominant in those positions and getting where he wants against high-level fighters. And so my call is that I just don't think DDP survives that early barrage from Khamzat. So I am picking Khamzat Chimaev round 1 submission. Now, would I be shocked if Khamzat Chimaev gasses out in round 1 and DDP manages to survive and either goes the distance or finds a finish? No, I would not be surprised. I think both these guys are very good fighters. I think it's a really fun clash. And I think when we're like recapping this fight, it'll seem very clear why one guy won. It'll be like, all right, like, yeah, we should have known Khamzat was just going to run through him, or Khamzat fades. And it's like, yeah, we should have known DDP was way more experienced, right? He was going to be able to go 5 rounds, push the pace, and Khamzat wouldn't be able to hold up. So I could certainly see the path for both winning, but Khamzat round 1 submission will be my pick. Now that is going to wrap it up for this video. If you guys enjoyed, hit the like button, subscribe, drop your picks down below. Would love to hear them. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.